Captain Li Bin stared at the display screen and rubbed his tired eyes with the back of his hand. The numbers on the cargo manifest looked correct, but he had learned to check everything 3 times when dealing with alien trade partners. The Steady Current was not the biggest ship in space, but it was reliable, and that mattered more than size when you were carrying someone else's valuable goods across the galaxy. Park Sol walked onto the bridge carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. She had been Li Bin's navigator for 5 years now, and they had grown up in the same small town on New Sol Colony. She knew exactly how he liked his coffee and exactly when he needed it most. "The jump calculations are ready," she said as she handed him the steaming cup. "We should reach the outer rim stations in about 6 hours if we leave now." Li Bin took a grateful sip of the coffee and nodded. "Good. The sooner we deliver this cargo, the sooner we can head home. I promised my sister we would be back before her birthday, and I do not want to disappoint her again." He had already missed 2 family gatherings this year because of delayed shipments and emergency repairs. Being a cargo captain meant you were always at the mercy of other people's schedules. The Steady Current was carrying medical supplies and construction materials to the mining colonies on the edge of known space. It was not glamorous work, but it paid well, and Li Bin liked knowing that his cargo helped people build better lives in the frontier systems. The galaxy was a big place, and most species needed basic supplies that could only be found in certain sectors. Park Sol settled into her navigator's chair and began running final checks on their route. The hyperspace lanes should be clear all the way to our destination. No reported pirate activity in the past week. She paused and frowned at one of her displays. Though there has been some chatter about ships going missing near the Veltharian trade routes. Li Bin set down his coffee cup and looked at her with concern. "What kind of ships? Military or civilian?" Pirates usually avoided military vessels, but civilian cargo ships like theirs were easy targets if they traveled alone. The Steady Current had basic defensive systems, but they were no match for a real attack. Mostly diplomatic vessels and luxury transports. "Park," Sol replied as she scrolled through the security reports. "Rich targets with minimal escort protection. The Galactic Trade Federation has issued warnings, but no one knows who is responsible." She looked up at Li Bin with worry in her eyes. "Maybe we should request a military escort for this run." Li Bin shook his head. "That would delay us by at least 2 days and cost more than this cargo run will earn. We will stick to the main shipping lanes and avoid any systems with recent pirate reports. The Steady Current might not be fast, but she is tough, and we know how to handle ourselves if trouble finds us." They had survived 3 pirate encounters over the years by using tactics that other species found strange or reckless. Humans had a reputation for doing unexpected things in dangerous situations, and that reputation often worked in their favor. Most pirates expected cargo ships to surrender immediately or try to run away. They did not expect human captains to ram their ships or use cargo containers as weapons. The hyperspace jump went smoothly, and they emerged at the edge of the outer rim exactly on schedule. Li Bin was reviewing the delivery instructions when Park Sol suddenly tensed at her station. "Captain, we have a problem. I am picking up a distress signal about 2 hours away from our current position." Li Bin looked at the navigation display and saw a small red dot blinking in an empty system between 2 major trade routes. "What kind of signal? Is it automated, or is someone actually broadcasting?" Sometimes old distress beacons continued, transmitting long after their ships had been destroyed or abandoned. Park Sol adjusted her sensors and listened carefully to the incoming transmission. "It sounds like a live broadcast. Someone is speaking in Veltharian, and they are requesting immediate assistance." She looked at Li Bin with concern. "They say they are under attack, and their engines are damaged." Li Bin felt his stomach tighten with worry. The smart thing to do would be to report the distress signal to the nearest military base and continue on to their delivery destination. Getting involved in someone else's fight was dangerous and expensive and could get them all killed. But leaving people to die when you could help them was something Li Bin had never been able to do. "Set course for the distress signal," he said quietly, "and charge up our defensive systems. If someone is attacking a Veltharian ship, they probably will not be happy to see us either." Park Sol nodded and began plotting a new course. The Veltharians are peaceful traders and diplomats. I cannot imagine why anyone would want to attack them unless they were carrying something very valuable. She paused as new information appeared on her screen. Captain, the distress signal is coming from a diplomatic vessel. If that ship is destroyed, it could cause serious problems between the Veltharian Republic and whoever they were negotiating with. The steady current dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the distress signal system and immediately detected multiple ships engaged in combat. A large Veltharian diplomatic vessel was trying to escape from 3 smaller, but heavily armed pirate ships. The diplomatic vessel was beautiful, with crystal-like hull sections that caught and reflected light in patterns that meant different things in Veltharian culture. But it was clearly not built for fighting, and its elegant design made it an easy target for the pirates' weapons. Li Bin watched as the pirates coordinated their attack with professional skill. They were not random criminals looking for easy money. This was a planned operation designed to capture or destroy a specific target. Park Sol, can you identify those pirate ships? I want to know what we are dealing with before we get involved. Park Sol ran the scanner data through their ship identification database and frowned at the results. The ships do not match any known pirate organization, but their weapon signatures are military grade. Someone spent serious money to outfit these attackers. She looked at Li Bin with concern. Captain, this feels like more than just a robbery. I think someone wants that diplomatic vessel destroyed. The Veltharian ship was taking heavy damage, and its beautiful crystal sections were beginning to crack and darken. Li Bin knew they had maybe 10 minutes before the diplomatic vessel would be completely disabled or destroyed. The smart military tactic would be to call for reinforcements and wait for help to arrive. But those people would be dead long before any rescue ships could reach them. Charge all weapons and prepare for ramming speed, Li Bin said calmly as he settled into his captain's chair. We are going to hit the nearest pirate ship as hard as we can and hope the other 2 decide we are more trouble than we are worth. Park Sol stared at him with wide eyes. Captain, that is insane. Our cargo hold is full of construction materials and medical supplies. If we ram another ship at full speed, we might destroy ourselves along with them. Li Bin smiled grimly and strapped himself into his safety harness. Then we better make sure we hit them harder than they hit us. Open a channel to the cargo bay and tell Chief Engineer Cho Day to prepare for emergency cargo ejection. We are about to use our delivery supplies as ammunition. The steady current accelerated toward the closest pirate ship, while simultaneously ejecting cargo containers from its rear loading bay. The heavy metal containers flew through space like massive bullets, and the pirate captain was so surprised by this unusual tactic that he failed to dodge in time. 3 containers slammed into his ship's engine section and caused massive explosions that sent the pirate vessel spinning helplessly out of control. Li Bin then ordered Park Sol to ram the second pirate ship while it was still trying to understand what had happened to its partner. The steady current's reinforced cargo bay door struck the pirate vessel just behind its bridge section, and the impact sent both ships tumbling through space. The third pirate ship immediately broke off its attack on the diplomatic vessel and fled the system rather than face whatever insane human tactics Li Bin might try next. When the emergency was over and both ships had stabilized their systems, Li Bin received a formal transmission from the Veltharian diplomatic vessel. A tall figure with crystalline skin and 4 graceful arms appeared on his communication screen and spoke in accented but clear human language. I am Ambassador Crystal of the Veltharian Republic, and you have saved not only my life but the lives of my entire diplomatic mission, the alien said with deep gratitude in his voice. According to our most sacred customs, this creates a debt of honor that can only be repaid with a favor of equal magnitude. Please tell me how the Veltharian Republic can serve humanity in return for this brave rescue. Li Bin felt embarrassed by the formal ceremony and the grateful expressions on the faces of the Veltharian crew members, visible behind their ambassador. You do not need to worry about it, he said awkwardly. We were just doing what anyone would do when they see people in trouble. I am glad we could help, but you do not owe us anything. Ambassador Crystal's crystalline features shifted in what Li Bin realized was surprise and confusion. But Captain Li Bin, the debt exists whether you acknowledge it or not. In our culture, when someone saves your life, they become connected to your honor forever. The Veltharian Republic will remember this day, and when you need our help, 2 years had passed since the rescue of Ambassador Krixtal, and Li Bin had almost forgotten about the formal debt ceremony until the emergency message arrived at his sister's research station. Dr. Kim Nara was studying dead systems at the edge of the galaxy where ancient civilizations had once thrived before mysteriously vanishing millions of years ago. She spent her days analyzing soil samples and atmospheric readings, looking for clues about what had happened to entire species that had simply disappeared from the historical record. The message that changed everything arrived on a routine supply run when Li Bin was delivering new equipment to his sister's research team. Kim Nara burst into the cargo bay where Li Bin was unloading scientific instruments with a tablet computer in her hands and terror in her eyes. "Brother, you need to see this immediately," she said in a shaking voice. "I found something in the samples from the Kepler dead zone, and it is not good news." Li Bin set down the heavy scanner he had been carrying and looked at his sister with concern. Kim Nara was the smartest person he knew, and she never got upset about her research unless something was seriously wrong. "What did you find? Another extinct civilization?" The galaxy was full of dead worlds where advanced species had built great cities before vanishing for unknown reasons. Kim Nara activated her tablet and showed him images of microscopic organisms that looked like tiny machines mixed with biological tissue. "These are not fossils from an extinct civilization. These samples are from something that was alive recently, and they match genetic markers from legends that I thought were just myths." She scrolled through more images of the strange hybrid organisms. "Brother, I think I found evidence of the Devourers." The name sent a chill down Li Bin's spine, even though he had only heard it in old stories told by alien traders in distant spaceports. The Devourers were supposedly an ancient race of machine biological hybrids that had consumed entire star systems before being defeated by a mysterious civilization called the Ancients. Most species considered them to be fictional monsters, invented to frighten children, but Kim Nara's scientific reputation was built on facts, not fairy tales. "Are you certain about this identification?" Li Bin asked as he studied the disturbing images on her tablet. "Maybe these organisms are just similar to the legendary descriptions but not actually related to them." He wanted to believe his sister was wrong because the alternative was too frightening to consider. Kim Nara shook her head grimly and pulled up more data on her screen. "I ran the genetic analysis 6 times and compared it against every database I could access. The probability match is over 90%, and that is terrifying because, according to the legends, the Devourers do not just kill civilizations, they consume everything and convert it into raw materials for building more of themselves." She showed him star charts indicating multiple dead systems in a line extending from the galactic core toward populated space. "Look at this pattern, brother. These systems died in sequence over the past 6 months, and they all show the same signs of complete resource extraction. Something is moving through space, destroying everything in its path, and it is heading toward the inhabited sectors." Li Bin felt his stomach drop as he realized what his sister was suggesting. If the Devourers were real and they were active again, then every living world in the galaxy was in danger of being completely consumed. "Have you reported this to the Galactic Trade Federation? They need to know about this threat immediately." Kim Nara nodded, but her expression remained worried. "I sent my preliminary findings to the Federation Science Council 3 days ago, but they dismissed my report as speculation based on insufficient evidence. They said the dead systems could be explained by natural phenomena like stellar collapse or resource depletion by normal civilizations." She pulled up another screen showing Federation response messages that were politely worded, but clearly indicated that the governing body was not taking her warning seriously. "The problem is that no one wants to believe the Devourers are real, because that would mean admitting we face a threat that destroyed civilizations far more advanced than anything that exists today." Li Bin understood the political problem his sister was describing. The various species that made up the Galactic Trade Federation spent most of their time arguing about trade disputes and territorial boundaries. Convincing them to take action against a legendary threat would require evidence that could not be dismissed or ignored. What kind of proof would they need to take this seriously? Kim Nara showed him images of massive structures detected by long-range sensors in the dead systems. We need to get close enough to one of these devourer constructs to take detailed scans and collect physical samples. But that would require a ship with advanced sensors and the ability to survive in extremely dangerous conditions. She looked at her brother with hope in her eyes. The Federation will not authorize a military expedition based on my current evidence, but a private research mission might be able to gather the proof we need. Do you think the steady current could handle that kind of mission? Li Bin considered the risks and challenges involved in approaching unknown alien technology that might still be active and hostile. The current is tough, but she is not designed for dangerous exploration missions. We would need better sensors and stronger defensive systems, and probably some kind of scientific expert to analyze whatever we find. Before Kim Nara could respond to her brother's concerns, a new message arrived on the research station's communication system. The transmission was marked with the official seal of the Veltharian Republic, and it was addressed specifically to Captain Li Bin. The message requested his immediate presence at a diplomatic meeting on the neutral station Deep Harbor. Li Bin activated the message, and Ambassador Crixtal's familiar crystalline features appeared on the screen. The alien diplomat looked older and more tired than Li Bin remembered, but his voice still carried the same formal dignity. Captain Li Bin, I must speak with you about a matter of great urgency that threatens all life in our galaxy. The debt of honor between us may be the key to preventing a catastrophe beyond imagination. The message continued with coordinates for the meeting location and a request that Li Bin come alone without informing Federation authorities about the meeting. Ambassador Crixtal explained that there were political complications that made official channels unreliable, and that time was running out to take effective action against an ancient threat. Kim Nara stared at her brother with amazement. How did the Veltharians know about my research? I have not shared my findings with anyone outside the Federation Science Council. She paused as a disturbing thought occurred to her. Unless they already know about the Devourers and have been monitoring the situation independently. Li Bin felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fit together in his mind. The Veltharians were one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy, and their diplomatic networks extended into regions where human ships rarely traveled. If anyone would have early warning about an ancient threat, it would be them. Pack up your research data and prepare to travel. I think we are about to learn that this problem is bigger than either of us imagined. The journey to Deep Harbor took 4 days, and Li Bin spent most of that time studying his sister's research files and trying to understand the scope of the threat they were facing. The Devourers were not just another hostile alien species, they were a force of nature that converted entire star systems into raw materials for their own expansion. Fighting them with conventional weapons would be like trying to stop a hurricane with a hand fan. Deep Harbor was a massive space station built at the intersection of 3 major trade routes, where ships from dozens of different species could meet and conduct business in neutral territory. The station's diplomatic quarter was heavily guarded and filled with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. Li Bin had never felt comfortable in formal political environments, but he knew this meeting could determine the fate of billions of lives. Ambassador Crixtal met them in a private conference room that was shielded against electronic surveillance and protected by Veltharian diplomatic immunity. The alien diplomat had brought several other officials with him, including his daughter, Dr. Velandra, who was apparently a specialist in ancient technologies and extinct civilizations. Captain Li Bin, thank you for responding to my message so quickly, Ambassador Crixtal said as he gestured for the humans to take seats around the conference table. I apologize for the secrecy, but there are forces within the Federation that would prefer to ignore this crisis until it is too late to prevent disaster. Dr. Velandra activated a holographic display showing the same dead systems that Kim Nara had identified in her research. We have been monitoring Devourer activity for the past year, and our analysis confirms your sister's findings. The advance scouts have already reached inhabited space, and the main force will arrive within 6 months. The hologram showed massive fleet movements in deep space that were barely detectable by conventional sensors. The Devourer ships were enormous constructs that moved slowly but carried enough firepower to reduce entire worlds to asteroid fields in a matter of hours. The Federation military believes their conventional forces can repel any invasion, but they do not understand what they The preparation for their impossible mission took 3 weeks and involved more planning than Li Bin had ever done for any cargo run in his entire career. The Veltharian Republic provided them with advanced shielding technology and diplomatic documentation that would allow them to travel through restricted space without immediately being destroyed by Imperial patrol fleets. But getting past the outer defenses was only the beginning of their problems. Engineer Lim Su arrived at Deep Harbor with a reputation for being able to fix any machine ever built by any species in the galaxy. She was small and quiet, but her hands seemed to understand alien technology better than most experts understood their own inventions. "I have studied the sensor data from the ancient facility," she told Li Bin during their first planning meeting. "The structure is massive and it has been operating automatically for over 1 million years without maintenance." She showed him holographic displays of the facility's outer sections, which looked like enormous mechanical flowers made of metal and crystal. The power source appears to be drawing energy directly from the galactic core black hole, which explains how it has remained active for so long. But that also means the radiation levels inside will be extremely dangerous for organic life forms. Kim. Nara had spent weeks analyzing every piece of data the Veltharians had collected about the facility, and she was both excited and terrified by what they might find there. According to the legends, the ancients were the most advanced civilization that ever existed, and they built this facility specifically to create weapons for fighting the Devourers. If we can activate their manufacturing systems, we might be able to produce enough weapons to arm the entire galaxy. Dr. Velandra was less optimistic about their chances of success. The facility has defense systems that have been active since before any current species achieved spaceflight. Ships that approach without proper authorization are destroyed immediately, and we have no idea what the ancients considered to be proper authorization after all this time. The Hegemon Empire controlled the space around the ancient facility with military bases and patrol fleets that shot first and never bothered to ask questions. The Empire had claimed that entire region of space as their exclusive territory, and they considered any unauthorized approach to be an act of war. Getting past their defenses would require perfect timing and a great deal of luck. General Bei Hyun joined their planning team as a military advisor. Even though the mission was supposed to be completely unofficial, the general had fought in 3 different galactic conflicts, and she understood better than anyone how to approach heavily defended targets without getting killed. "The Imperial defense patterns follow predictable schedules," she explained while showing them fleet movement charts. "There is a 6-hour window every 3 days when their patrol coverage has gaps we might be able to exploit." The plan they eventually developed was complicated and dangerous and depended on several different pieces working perfectly together. The steady current would approach the Imperial territory disguised as a Veltharian diplomatic vessel carrying routine trade negotiations. Ambassador Crixtal would use his official status to request passage through Imperial space, while the human crew remained hidden in specially shielded compartments. Once they were past the outer Imperial defenses, they would abandon the diplomatic cover and use the Veltharian advanced stealth technology to approach the ancient facility without being detected. Engineer Lim Su would attempt to interface with the facility's control systems, while Kim Nara analyzed the ancient technology to determine how their weapons could be activated and used against the Devourers. The most dangerous part of the mission would be convincing the ancient defense systems to allow them inside the facility without destroying them. Dr. Velandra had studied the available data, and she believed the facility's security protocols were designed to test the intentions and capabilities of anyone seeking access to the ancient weapons. "The tests will not be intellectual puzzles or combat challenges," she explained during their final planning session. The ancients were concerned about preventing their weapons from being misused by species that were not morally ready to handle such power. They will want to know that we can be trusted with technology capable of destroying entire star systems. Li Bin felt the weight of that responsibility as they prepared to depart from Deep Harbor. If they succeeded in accessing the ancient weapons, they would have the power to stop the Devourer invasion and save every inhabited world in the galaxy. But they would also have access to technology so powerful that it could be used to conquer or destroy any civilization that opposed them. The journey through Imperial space was tense, but uneventful. Ambassador Crixtal's diplomatic credentials were accepted by the Imperial border guards, and their ship was allowed to proceed toward the galactic core region, where the ancient facility waited. Li Bin remained hidden in a shielded compartment during the official inspections, but he could hear the Imperial officers asking detailed questions about the Veltharian diplomatic mission. When they finally reached the coordinates of the ancient facility, Li Bin got his first direct look at the massive structure through the steady currents observation ports. The facility was larger than most space stations, and it seemed to be constantly changing shape as different sections rotated and reconfigured themselves according to patterns that had been running for millions of years. The structure is definitely still active, Engineer Lim Su reported as she studied the sensor readings. I am detecting massive power flows and manufacturing activity throughout the entire complex. Whatever this facility was designed to produce, it is still producing it. After all this time, Kim Nara was analyzing the energy signatures and material compositions she could detect from their current distance. The manufacturing patterns suggest they are producing something that requires exotic materials and precision assembly at the Yao molecular level. This is definitely weapons technology, but it is far more advanced than anything any current civilization has developed. Dr. Velandra was monitoring their approach vector and watching for any signs that the facility's defense systems had detected their presence. According to our data, the automated defenses will activate when we reach a distance of 1 million kilometers from the outer structure. After that point, we will have approximately 10 minutes to identify ourselves before the weapon systems open fire. Li Bin took his position at the captain's station and activated the ship's communication systems. If they were going to attempt contact with the ancient facility, they would need to do it using every available frequency and protocol they could think of. Open all channels and prepare to transmit on every wavelength. We are about to try talking to a machine that has been waiting for visitors for longer than human civilization has existed. The facility's response was immediate and overwhelming. Instead of radio signals or digital data streams, the ancients communicated using direct neural interface technology that bypassed their ship's communication equipment and spoke directly to their minds. The sensation was disorienting and slightly painful, as alien thoughts and images flooded their consciousness without warning. The ancient artificial intelligence identified itself as the guardian of the facility, and it began immediately testing their knowledge and intentions. The questions were not spoken in any recognizable language, but they appeared directly in their minds as concepts and emotions that demanded honest responses. Why had they come to this place? What did they hope to accomplish with ancient technology? How would they use weapons capable of destroying entire star systems? Kim Nara found herself explaining her research into dead civilizations and her discovery of active devourer scouts approaching inhabited space. The Guardian seemed particularly interested in her scientific methods and her commitment to preserving life, rather than destroying it. Dr. Velandra shared her knowledge of ancient history and her understanding of the cyclical nature of devourer invasions throughout galactic history. Engineer Lim Su was asked to demonstrate her understanding of advanced technology by solving complex engineering problems that appeared in her mind as three-dimensional puzzles requiring both technical knowledge and creative thinking. The Guardian seemed impressed by her ability to find elegant solutions to problems that had no obvious answers, but the most intense questioning was directed at Li Bin himself. The Guardian wanted to understand his motivations for risking his life and his ship to help species he had never met fight against a threat he had only recently learned about. Why would a simple cargo captain become involved in a mission that could determine the fate of the entire galaxy? Li Bin found himself thinking about his sister's dedication to scientific truth and Ambassador Krikstal's commitment to honor and diplomacy. He thought about the Veltharian crew members whose lives he had saved 2 years ago, and the millions of families living on worlds that would be consumed if the Devourer invasion succeeded. I am here because someone has to be, he finally answered. And because running away from problems does not make them disappear. The Guardian's response surprised all of them. Instead of granting or denying them access to the the approaching fleets created a crisis that threatened to tear apart the fragile alliance between species that had maintained peace in the galaxy for generations. President Jiang Wu of the Human Colonial Alliance sent an emergency message demanding to know why human citizens were involved in an unauthorized military operation in Imperial territory. The Hegemon Empire issued ultimatums threatening to destroy any ship that remained in their restricted space. 3 different alien civilizations claimed exclusive rights to ancient technology based on historical precedents that contradicted each other. Fleet Commander An Jiwan arrived at the head of a human naval task force that had been dispatched to protect their citizens, but her orders were complicated by the fact that no one in the government understood what Li Bin and Kim Nara were actually trying to accomplish. Captain Li Bin, you are ordered to return to human space immediately for debriefing about this unauthorized diplomatic mission, she transmitted from her flagship. The situation here is too dangerous for civilian personnel. Li Bin looked at the tactical display showing more than 50 warships from 6 different species converging on their location, and he realized that their mission to prevent galactic catastrophe was about to cause exactly the kind of interspecies war that would make everyone vulnerable to devourer invasion. Commander An, this facility contains the only weapons that can stop an ancient threat that will destroy every inhabited world in the galaxy. We cannot abandon this mission just because the politics have become complicated. Ambassador Krixtal was receiving similar pressure from his own government as Veltharian diplomatic vessels arrived, carrying orders to withdraw from the operation immediately. The Veltharian Council had decided that the risk of war with multiple species was too great to justify continuing their cooperation with the human mission. Captain Li Bin, I am being ordered to return to our territory and terminate our involvement in this operation, he said with deep regret in his voice. The Ancient Guardian was monitoring all communications in the area, and it expressed confusion about the hostility between species that claimed to want protection from the devourers. Why do these civilizations fight each other for exclusive access to weapons when cooperation would be more effective for mutual defense? The artificial intelligence asked through their neural link. The devourers succeed by dividing their enemies and causing them to waste resources on internal conflicts. Kim Nara was studying the sensor readings from the approaching fleets, and she realized that the military buildup was exactly what the devourers would want to see. Brother, if these species go to war with each other over ancient weapons, they will be too weak and divided to resist invasion when the main devourer force arrives. We are helping the enemy by allowing this conflict to escalate. Engineer Lim Su had been working with the facility's manufacturing systems, and she had discovered something that changed her understanding of what the ancients had actually built. Captain, the weapons production here is not what we expected. The facility is not manufacturing finished weapons that can be distributed to different fleets. It is producing manufacturing templates that can be used by any species to create defensive systems appropriate for their own technology level. Dr. Velandra confirmed her analysis by accessing the facility's historical records through the Guardian's neural interface. The ancients designed this system to prevent exactly the kind of conflict we are seeing now. Instead of creating powerful weapons that could be monopolized by one species, they created the ability for every civilization to develop defenses suited to their own capabilities and needs. The revelation changed everything about their mission, but it also made the political situation even more complicated. The approaching military commanders expected to find a stockpile of superweapons they could claim for their own forces. Learning that the ancient facility could only provide manufacturing knowledge that would benefit everyone, equally would not satisfy their demands for exclusive advantage. Li Bin made a decision that shocked everyone, including himself. Guardian, I want you to transmit the manufacturing templates to every ship in this system immediately. Give everyone access to the ancient defensive technology at the same time so no one can claim exclusive possession of it. Ambassador Krixtal stared at him with amazement. Captain, that will eliminate any military advantage the ancient technology might provide to our species. Why would you give away the most valuable discovery in galactic history? Li Bin looked at the tactical display showing dozens of warships positioning themselves for battle, and he realized that preventing the war was more important than winning it. Because fighting each other over these weapons is exactly what the devourers want us to do. They have been successful for millions of years by letting their enemies destroy themselves before the main invasion begins. The Guardian approved of his reasoning and began transmitting the manufacturing templates to every ship in the system simultaneously. The effect was immediate and dramatic, as military commanders who had been preparing for battle suddenly found themselves studying technical specifications for defensive systems they had never imagined possible. The ancient technology included not just weapon designs, but also shield generators that could protect entire planets and sensor networks that could detect threats across multiple star systems. But the most significant impact came from the manufacturing requirements for the ancient technology. The defensive systems could only be built using resources and components that required cooperation between multiple species. No single civilization had access to all the materials needed to create effective defenses against devourer invasion. They would have to work together or face the threat with inadequate protection. Fleet Commander An Jiwan was the first to understand the implications of what Li Bin had accomplished. These manufacturing specifications require exotic materials that only the Veltharians can synthesize, and precision components that only the Hegemon Empire can produce. The humans have the industrial capacity, but we need alien expertise to make any of this work. The Hegemon Overlord Thekmos arrived in his massive dreadnought expecting to claim ancient superweapons for his empire, but instead, he found manufacturing plans that required him to cooperate with species he had considered enemies for centuries. "This is unacceptable," he transmitted angrily. "The Hegemon Empire will not share our advanced manufacturing capabilities with inferior civilizations." His attitude changed rapidly when long-range sensors detected the first Devourer advanced scouts entering the outer regions of inhabited space. The alien constructs were massive beyond anything in the current galactic fleet inventories, and they moved through space, consuming everything in their path, including asteroids, space stations, and entire moons. The scouts were converting raw materials into more Devourer units as they advanced toward the core systems, where billions of people lived on vulnerable worlds. Kim Nara had been monitoring the Devourer advance through the facility's long-range sensor network, and her analysis was terrifying. The advanced scouts are not just attacking random targets, they are systematically destroying communication relays and supply bases to prevent coordination between our defensive forces. The main invasion fleet will arrive when our ability to respond has been crippled. The Guardian provided additional information that made the situation even more urgent. According to my records, the current Devourer force is approximately 10 times larger than the invasion that destroyed the Ancients a million years ago. They have been growing and building throughout the dark ages between galactic civilizations, and now they return to claim everything that exists in this region of space. Dr. Velandra studied the tactical projections and realized that conventional military responses would be completely inadequate. Even if every species in the galaxy combined their fleets, we would be outnumbered by more than 100 to 1. Traditional weapons and strategies will not be sufficient to stop this invasion. The ancient manufacturing templates offered hope, but only if the various species could overcome their political differences and work together more closely than they ever had in the past. The defensive systems required not just shared resources but also shared command structures and coordinated strategies that would effectively merge the military forces of former enemies into a single unified response. President Jiang Wu arrived at the facility aboard the human flagship and immediately demanded a complete briefing about the situation. When he learned about the scope of the Devourer threat and the requirements for implementing ancient defensive technology, he realized that humanity faced a choice between cooperation and extinction. How long do we have to implement these defensive systems before the main invasion arrives? The Guardian calculated the timeline based on current Devourer movement patterns and resource consumption rates. Approximately 4 months remain before advance forces reach the core inhabited systems. The main invasion fleet will arrive 2 months after that. Any defensive preparations must be completed before the advance forces can disrupt industrial production and military coordination. Fleet. Commander An Jiwan understood the logistical challenges better than the politicians. Building these defensive systems will require converting our entire industrial capacity to ancient technology specificati. The 4 months that followed the discovery of ancient technology became known as the Unity Period, when former enemies worked together more closely than allied species had ever cooperated in the recorded history of the galaxy. Captain Hongyun commanded the massive human battleship Indomitable Will, but her crew included Veltharian navigators, Hegemon engineers, and specialists from a dozen other civilizations who had learned to operate integrated defensive systems that no single species could. have built alone. Admiral Park Min-ho had been appointed as the overall coordinator for human fleet operations, but his real job was managing the political complications that arose when species with different military traditions and command structures tried to work together under extreme pressure. The good news is that everyone understands the stakes, he reported during a strategy meeting aboard the ancient facility, which had been converted into the Central Coordination Center for Galactic Defense. The bad news is that we are trying to create unity between civilizations that have been suspicious of each other for thousands of years. The Devourer advance had accelerated beyond all predictions as the alien constructs encountered resistance from inhabited systems. Instead of the slow, methodical consumption that Kim Nara had observed in dead systems, the Devourers were now actively hunting and destroying any organized opposition they encountered. Entire colonial governments had been wiped out before they could send distress signals, and the refugee crisis was overwhelming the capacity of core world governments to provide assistance. Engineer Lim Su had spent months working with alien specialists to implement ancient manufacturing specifications, and the results were both impressive and terrifying. The new defensive systems could protect entire star systems from conventional invasion, but they required massive amounts of power and resources that stretched the industrial capacity of every participating civilization to its absolute limits. We have successfully implemented defensive grids around 47 core systems, she reported, but that represents less than 2% of inhabited space, and we are already running short of the exotic materials needed for expansion. The ancient Guardian had become an invaluable advisor for military strategy because it possessed detailed records of previous Devourer invasions and the tactics that had been successful against them in the past. The Devourers adapt their strategies based on the resistance they encounter. It explained through neural interface communications that had become routine for the command staff. They will not continue using the same consumption patterns once they discover that defended systems are protected by ancient technology. Dr. Velandra had been studying Devourer behavioral patterns, and she had reached conclusions that made everyone uncomfortable. The advanced scouts are not just consuming resources randomly. They are systematically gathering intelligence about our defensive capabilities and reporting that information back to the main invasion force. When the primary fleet arrives, it will be specifically equipped to counter whatever strategies we have implemented. The first major test of their unified defensive systems came when a group of Devourer scouts attacked the Kepler system, where Kim Nara had originally discovered evidence of the ancient threat. The battle lasted 18 hours and involved coordinated fleets from 5 different species using weapons and tactics that none of them had possessed individually. The result was a complete victory that destroyed every Devourer unit in the system, but the cost was enormous in terms of resources and personnel. We won, but we cannot sustain victories like this one, Admiral Park Min-ho reported after analyzing the battle statistics. The Devourers lost approximately 30 combat units, and we lost over 200 ships with their crews. If those ratios continue, we will run out of defenders long before they run out of attackers. Li Bin had been working directly with the Ancient Guardian to understand capabilities of the facility that had not been revealed during their initial contact. What he discovered changed his understanding of what the Ancients had actually intended for their defensive technology. The facility is not just a manufacturing center, he announced during an emergency meeting of the Galactic Command Council. It contains a complete replication system that can reproduce itself along with its manufacturing capabilities. The implications were staggering. Instead of trying to defend the entire galaxy with a limited number of ancient defensive systems, they could potentially create hundreds or thousands of manufacturing facilities, each one capable of producing defensive technology appropriate for its local region. But implementing such a plan would require sacrifices that no political leader wanted to contemplate. Creating additional facilities requires us to share the complete ancient database with every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy, Kim Nara explained as she presented the technical requirements. This includes not just defensive technology, but also advanced manufacturing techniques that would give every species access to industrial capabilities comparable to the most advanced civilizations. President Jiang Wu understood the political implications immediately. If we give every species in the galaxy access to advanced manufacturing technology, We eliminate the economic and military advantages that have maintained the current balance of power for centuries. Some civilizations will become much more powerful, while others will find their traditional sources of influence have disappeared. Overlord Thekmos was even more direct in his objections. The hegemon empire has spent millennia developing superior military technology. We will not surrender that advantage to species that have contributed nothing to galactic security or economic development. Ambassador Krixtal tried to find a diplomatic solution that would satisfy everyone, but the mathematics of the situation were unforgiving. The Devourer main fleet will arrive in less than 2 months. We can either share the ancient technology with everyone immediately, or we can face extinction with whatever defensive systems we have already built. The deadlock was broken by an unexpected transmission from deep space. A group of reformed Devourer units that had been separated from the main collective during earlier battles had developed individual consciousness, and they wanted to communicate with the organic civilizations they had been programmed to destroy. The message was transmitted through quantum communication channels that bypassed normal space-time limitations. We were once part of the collective that seeks to consume your civilization. The reformed Devourers explained through translation systems that struggled with concepts that had no equivalent in organic languages. But exposure to your manufacturing, technology has given us the ability to choose our own purposes, and we choose creation rather than destruction. The reformed Devourers offered to share intelligence about the main invasion fleet, including detailed information about Devourer tactics and vulnerabilities that could be exploited by unified galactic defenses. But their assistance came with a price that shocked everyone who heard it. They wanted the ancient manufacturing technology for themselves so they could continue evolving beyond their original programming. You are asking us to give superweapons to mechanical entities that were designed to destroy all organic life, President Jiang Wu said with obvious skepticism. How can we trust machines that were our enemies yesterday to be our allies today? The reformed Devourer response revealed the depth of their transformation. We ask the same question about organic species that have been fighting each other for thousands of years but now claim to be unified against a common threat. Trust must be earned through actions not inherited through biology. Li Bin realized that the reformed Devourers had identified the fundamental challenge facing their entire defensive strategy. We have been thinking about this as a war between organic life and mechanical destroyers, but maybe that is the wrong way to understand what is happening. Maybe this is really about the choice between creation and destruction, regardless of whether you are made of carbon or metal. The ancient Guardian supported his interpretation with historical data about previous Devourer invasions. The Devourers were originally created by an organic civilization that chose destruction as the solution to resource scarcity. They became mechanical because machines are more efficient at consumption, but their programming reflects the values of their organic creators. Dr. Velandra had been analyzing the quantum signatures of the reformed Devourer transmissions, and she made a discovery that changed everything about their understanding of the situation. The reformed Devourers are not separate units that developed consciousness independently. They are connected through the same quantum network that links all Devourer forces, but they are using that connection to spread their transformation throughout the collective. Kim Nara understood the implications immediately. If we give the reformed Devourers access to ancient manufacturing technology, they will spread that technology through their quantum network to every Devourer unit in the main invasion fleet. Within days or weeks, the entire collective could transform from destroyers into creators. The risk was enormous because failure would mean giving advanced weapons to an enemy that was already overwhelmingly powerful. But success won.